initiating new circles and incorporating new members into existing circles. And really, again, what we want to do is have a conversation with you. Present the model that we have been using in North America and that as the North American Conference we've all agreed to. So this is what we're going to start with today is a little bit about what we've been saying is our model for initiating new members into circles of Redemptorist associates or starting new circles and how that works. So most of you are going to be familiar with that. Some not. And so stop us at any point and ask any questions you need to ask. And if I do start talking too fast, just like hold up a sign or something, because Newfoundlanders do that all the time. So I think we might start by, I might ask David to have a little chat with you about where he began to do this last night. But how did we come to the model that I'm going to show you on the screen?
Okay, so that first slide, it's what we're going to do is take each of the bullets there and elaborate on it a bit. So that slide number 2 is just to give you the overview. So we're not going to go into detail quite yet. We're going to take them one at a time. The first thing that we had to do, as I said last night, was find out if anybody was interested in Canada in being a little more closely associated with Redemptorists. So that was kind of the way we got going, the way we initially invited people. So it was people that the Redemptorist confreres in the various places were already in touch with, and they already had kind of a sense that these people had some kind of a Redemptorist heart, to use a word that we've been bandying about a fair bit. So that was and there's going to be a lot of discussion about that. I mean, now that we have circles, it is a big question. How do we enlarge them or create new ones and so on? So that'll be a large part of the discussion when we get to that first point. And then once we had those people together, Anne and I sat down and said, okay, now what do we do? And we thought that a weekend, we're talking about lay people who have jobs and all that kind of stuff, so you can't call them away for a month formation or something. So we decided maybe a weekend retreat that would kind of open up for them this whole area. We kind of went from the notion that joining a Redemptorist circle, being a Redemptorist associate, was something about finding a spiritual home. And so we thought maybe one of the first things we have to talk about is, what do we mean by that? What is spirituality? So we did a kind of a general thing, this was at this retreat day, about spirituality, and then we specified that a bit more. What is Christian spirituality, and then what is Redemptorist spirituality? So that was to try to create a context within Christianity and the church and the Redemptorist congregation for this endeavor of establishing circles that could become a spiritual home for people. And once people had been through that initial weekend retreat, there were 4 follow-up sessions that we didn't go to do each of the follow-up sessions. Rather, we had each group, we provided materials, and each group then had 4 follow-up sessions based on the pillars of Redemptorist Alphonsian spirituality. And once they had been through the retreat and the 4 follow-up sessions, we then invited them to make a decision about whether they wanted to join, to become Redemptorist associates. And those who did were enrolled. And again, that was a local celebration, kind of presided over by the Redemptorist superior of the place. And then there was ongoing, the groups made decisions about when and where and how often they would meet. And we provided, and you're going to get also a memory stick with all kinds of stuff, but we provided materials for the groups to conduct their own, to help them have their own monthly meetings, kind of developing and enlarging and nurturing their sense of what it is to be part of the Redemptorist family. And that's where we are at this point. It was probably 2001, 2002, and we made our way across the country. I mean, because that retreat, Anne and I guided that retreat, and we were both, this wasn't our full-time job. We all had, we both had work and ministries and so on. So we worked out weekends where we were both free, and so were the people in the places. And we went to Grand Prairie, Saskatoon, Sudbury, and Toronto, and St. John's.
And St. John, New Brunswick too, I think.
Did we go? Yeah. Oh, yeah, we did. Yeah. So we went to 6 places. 2001, 2002. I mean, I can't remember exact dates anymore, but it was at that time. And as that got moving, I think that was your initiative, wasn't it, Anne? To contact the American provinces to see if there were people there who were collaborating with Redemptorists, or and kind of what was happening. And so we had a number of North American gatherings of Redemptorists and lay people who were collaborating with Redemptorists. And it was out of that we then formed, did you call it a commission at that time, Anne?
I think we did.
Yeah. So it became a more, the provincials all agreed that we should have this North American thing, and so we became a commission, which kind of petered out. I forget exactly why and how. And it's only when the formation of conferences in the Redemptorist congregation, the restructuring that was going on in the congregation, that it became clear that the conference needed to have some secretariats or commissions or whatever. And at that point, Jack contacted Anne and me to get the names of the people who had been gathering more informally, and asked us to get together and see what we could do, knowing that was a bit amorphous. Anne and I volunteered to take responsibility for getting it happening and get it going. So that's why, we kind of ended up the coordinators, kind of just because we agreed to, knew that something needed to happen.
Had a bit of passion for it.
Yeah.
I think there were a few things we knew. Like, we knew that in St. Louis there had been a group of lay missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer, and that somehow or other that had a life, and then things had happened. And we knew that in Yorkton there was a really vibrant Partners in Mission movement. So it was kind of to begin to put some form and shape to it, and to see if it was real. To see if what we sensed as we went around the country in the Edmonton-Toronto province, it wasn't even all of Canada. It wasn't in St. Anne de Beaupré. We didn't go there because we were the Edmonton-Toronto province, and we were kind of new as a province too. And then we didn't either go to Yorkton, although we were in really close connection because the Yorkton students and the Edmonton-Toronto students studied together. We'd all gone to university together. There were close connections, so we were pretty aware of what was happening in the Yorkton province, and there was a lot of partnership there. But this whole thing, I remember the first meeting where we tried to pull together a North American group, and it was in Chicago. No, I lie. It was in New York. And I was nervous because I didn't feel like I had any backing or any credentials to be pulling this meeting together. Although my own provincial and all the provincials had said, do it, I was still really nervous. And I'd only heard about Father Pat Woods before. So I'd heard about Pat, and that he was gruff and big, but that he was really dedicated and had created some tremendous resources. So in my head, I'm 3 feet tall, and really not very secure. There's in my own, you know, everybody's like that. I think in your own little body, you're not anywhere near what other people think you might be. So I remember going into that meeting, starting off with a prayer, and in stormed Pat. And what I remember is he had this belt with American flags all around. And he said, all right, if I like what's happening, I'll stay. If not, I'm out of here. And I thought, oh my Lord. But he stayed. And he stayed for the 2 days. So I took that to be a good sign. And after that, we were like best friends. So it was terrific. But it just really validated for me that there was something more than our province and what was happening in one place. And then we began to hear stories about Portugal and Spain and a little bit about Holland, you know, about the Netherlands. And then we began to hear about lay missionaries in the Philippines. And so very quickly what we realized was, even though it wasn't one cohesive whole, there was something happening in other places, and it gave some validity to this too. So from that, any questions about that?
One thing I didn't make that first meeting. I forget
Right.
what came up, but I wasn't there, so Anne was kind of on her own. And she obviously did well. And Pat Woods became the greatest supporter of partnership in mission in North America.
It was before computers, right?
Yeah.
So Pat had everything in hard copy. And I still have, I don't know why I've never gotten rid of it, I still have the box of stuff he mailed me.
Yeah, I mean literally a box.
Yeah, and it is. It sits under my desk on a shelf, and it's been there for 20 years. But it's absolute. I still think it's a treasure, and someday I'll send it to the archives when I'm good and ready to let go of it. But I think it was the beginning of some, because when we started, we didn't really think resources or how do these people that we're going to be calling together, how do we give them some of that Redemptorist formation that they were so obviously craving? It was just more like, let's do it. And so Pat was really the start. I'm looking at Lucy because she knows him so well. But Pat was really the start of, we need to do more than call them together.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah, he wanted us to become a formal commission right off the bat, and he wanted someone to be hired to oversee all that. It took us 20 years to actually do that, but that was Pat's vision right from the start. And when we became a little more formalized, Paul Curry, is Paul here this morning? No, okay. He and Anne became the co-directors of that first thing.
First thing. So keeping that in mind, so if you have any questions or any comments, just jump in. But it goes back to our question, the comment that was made earlier, that you have to have, I think, for things to continue and succeed, a good vision. Somebody has to have a good vision or a good idea. There has to be a lot of guidance of the Holy Spirit, but there also have to be some charismatic figures or at least workers who are willing to carry this forward. And I think now what we're seeing is we have a lot of them. So once in Edmonton, Toronto, once we had done this sweep of the country and began to see that there was a need, did you talk about the initial retreat?
I did.
You did? Okay. So while I was fiddling.
Just outline, not in detail. We're going to go through each thing.
Right. So the model looks a bit like, this is what eventually developed. So what we actually, yes.
You might mention where this came from.
Oh, I will. Okay, let's do that.
This was and it was Anne's brainwave that if this North American thing, if we were going to have any impact and actually grow together, we needed to have a little project. And out of all that conversation came the idea to put together, this was initially intended for Redemptorist Associates. It's become much more widespread than that. But we decided to put together this little prayer book. And we were able to use the resources of the people who were in that initial group. And Wendy was a really key person in that because she works at Lagoria Publications and is a designer and all that. So this came out of, before we were sort of officially a secretariat or whatever, this was our first little project. And actually the group started to fall apart before it was completely finished. But thanks to Wendy, we got it off the ground.
And then we revitalized it. So eventually, what the North American Conference has agreed to is this model. So it'll be very familiar to most of you, because as we've moved, this is what we've done. So what we've said was, basically, if we're starting a new circle of associates, we would, first of all, address the issue of invitation. How do we invite people in? And we'll do each of these individually now in a bit. But how do we invite people to be Redemptorist associates? Who do we invite? So last night we looked at a list of characteristics and said who might be a Redemptorist associate. If you're this, and this, that might be a Redemptorist associate. That's exactly what we're talking about there. Redemptorist associates are out there all over the place. They're usually people who are active in a Redemptorist missionary center, expressing some kind of interest. They're usually serious about their faith or serious about inquiring about it. Right? Seekers, often. And they're going to say things like, I like the way you do things. I come here for the homilies. I like the quality of the preaching. I like the way you reach out to the poor. It's friendly here. Those are the people, when they're commenting on things like that, those are people we might want to have more conversations with and invite to be Redemptorist associates. So the first stage would be the invitation stage. Then there'll be an initial retreat day that's offered where we explore something about what drew you to these Redemptorists or to these other Redemptorist associates? What were the things that attracted you? Why do you think you felt that way? Where did it come from? What was the source of it, right? And then after that, there would be at least, now this is not meant to be, it has to be 3 or 4 follow-up sessions. It used to be 3 for us. It can be more. But the bare minimum would be that we offer these new Redemptorist associates some immersion in the 4 pillars of Redemptorist spirituality. So we often talk about 4 pillars: crib, incarnation; cross, redemption; altar, Eucharist; and Mary. So we would offer a session at least on each. Now you could do a year on each, or maybe even a lifetime. But to give a basic introduction to Redemptorist, the pillars of Redemptorist spirituality. And with the key question of, there's actually 2, how does this sit with you? Does this really still seem to resonate with you? And how does this move you into mission? Now, not to more work, but into a sense that you are connected to this Redemptorist mission. And then after that minimum, now there may be more, there's an enrollment ceremony. And the reason we did an enrollment was so that we could affirm the enrollment at the beginning of every quadrennium. So that every time Redemptorist appointments, usually when they're made for quadrennium or 4-year periods, there would be a chance for the local community to affirm the connection to the Redemptorist associates, and for the associates to reaffirm their connection to the local community or not, yeah, that's exactly, as the source from which they move out into the world in mission. And then there'd be follow-up sessions after the enrollment. Life doesn't end, so we'd have continued sessions for faith sharing and for formation, and that those would go on. So what we have done, building on Pat Woods' good work, is we've created a few years now of resources. And some groups go into studying different books or articles or faith sharing based on the Gospels. There's all kinds of ways to do it. As long as the initial part is a good solid foundation in the pillars of Redemptorist spirituality, the Redemptorist saints and blesseds, what the Redemptorist world, this world into which you're connected, what does it look like? So any questions about the model? That's a really good point, Lee. Thank you. And
you want to repeat that?
So Lee says that one of the things that she thinks is essential and that is sometimes missing from how we present these things. We present them as study sometimes. It's a study in Redemptorist spirituality, or it's a session, and really it's a process. And it's a process of discovering how this sits with you and whether this is the motivating force for your immersion in the church and the world. It's how you find your spiritual home. So yeah, I think it's really important as leaders for Circles of Redemptorist Associates to offer adults. What we're doing is faith formation and faith sharing. And for many people, for many adults, where the difference is, where growth happens, is in the pause, right, between an experience and something else. So you'll see people in the church, you will know them, who are experience hoppers. They go from one retreat to the next retreat to the next retreat, or from one program to the next program, and that's not what we want to be. There has to be an opportunity to integrate it. And whether that's through good questions, good reflective questions, or whether that's through opportunities for individual reflection and then group reflection. And that's why I would say there's a minimum that you do. And I would never say that 4 sessions is enough to call it formation. There has to be the opportunity for these adults that we're involved with to really take this material and take it away from pages and away from concepts and to make them motivating forces in our lives. So we're going to talk a bit more in a minute about each one of the pillars and that whole idea of initial formation. But I think it's important to remember that it's formation and not learning. Not that learning's not an important part of formation, it is. But it's a bigger and deeper piece than learning. This is about integration, and really it's about conversion. Right? So I always look at St. Alphonsus when I think about conversion. I used to think at one point in my life that conversion was once and for all. And so if I said yes to Jesus Christ, or yes to the Redemptorists, or yes to anything, that was it. It was done, over with. And it was complete. And that didn't last very long. Conversion is an ongoing reality. And it's a constant process of turning more and more to Jesus Christ and allowing Him to get in there and transform my life. So I think that's what we're inviting people to. Not that they're going to have the same experience I had. But Alphonsus, if we would identify the day that he laid his sword at the foot of Our Lady of Ransom statue and said that's his moment of conversion, we'd miss a lot. That was one moment. And maybe it was the decisive moment, but there was a lead up to that took 23 or 24 years. And there was a follow-up that was a constant deepening and turning more and more toward Jesus Christ, but toward Jesus Christ in the poor and the abandoned. And then so the process I think that Alphonsus followed is what we wish for our associates. It's that constant, or the invitation at least, to turn more and more to Jesus Christ in and through the poor, and to find in that meaning, a home. It's not asking them to do more work. It's to say, the work you do in the church, does this fit as the basis for it? Is this the foundation on which that house is built? This Redemptorist spirituality. And so it's ongoing and it's long term. So I think we continue to offer formation forever. It's an ongoing process. And you're rightly, it has to allow enough silence and enough time and enough good questions. So what we'd offer you as a North American Secretariat is a basis. And you put flesh on it. You know your people way better than we will. At the level of the conference, we'll want to supply you with the best stuff we can. And it sounds like a big deal now, big order, but you put flesh on that. And so it takes as long as it takes. What I think might be 1 session, you might say is 3, or you might say is 10. That's fine. the basic idea is that you would at least introduce people to the pillars of Redemptorist spirituality and to the notion of ongoing lifelong conversion in the spirit and model of St. Alphonsus. And that everything else, it takes as long as it takes. What matters is the process. Right? We haven't actually got a product at the end of this. It's not about producing good associates, right? It's about deepening people's spiritual journey so that they recognize in themselves the same spirit that was in St. Alphonsus, and maybe even more importantly, is in Redemptorists, and that they belong into this family. Questions, comments, concerns? Okay, Liz. I think it's both. I think it has to be that the individual sees him or herself as called by God and animated by the Spirit, and finding a home within this Redemptorist charism. That it gives coherence and meaning to the way they've been living their lives, and gives them strength to keep on doing it in that spirit, so that they have both a foundation and a community to do it. But therefore the community is important. I think every journey is both spiritual and communal. Right? God calls individuals, but he calls us into a community. And our outreach is as individuals and as a community. That's the distinctive piece about Redemptorist apostolic life. So as lay partners in mission, we don't necessarily live Redemptorist apostolic life. We don't live it. That's something that the vows bind the members to. But it animates us. And that's the way I always think of it, that Redemptorists are bound to one another by the vows, but that inspires us. It teaches us and offers us some way that we act in the world. So it's that essential that we act as community. Our mission is a communal mission, but each of us has a piece to give to it. Okay? So you sell drugs. You're a drug dealer, right? But what you do, it's not so much about what you do. See, a person who sells pharmaceuticals, we would not think of that as a normal, ordinary Redemptorist work. However, it's the how you do it, right? It's the spirit and the way you interact with the people you meet on your journey. That's what makes it Redemptorist. There's no one thing that the Redemptorists, we will say, that moral theology, preaching missions, outreach to the poor, those are traditional shrine ministries, are traditional Redemptorist works. As lay people, we'd say, yeah, that's true. It's how those inspire us in outreach using plain, ordinary language to spread the good news. The quality of your presence, that it is good news for people, right? So it's an individual decision and a commitment, but it's also communal.
I think maybe we need to broaden the word mission.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So when we use the word mission, it's not necessarily talking about doing a specific thing.
Mm-hmm.
But that we're all anointed as missionaries.
Right
Yeah.
on.
Yeah.
Right on.
Yeah.
A helpful distinction might be between mission and ministry. There is one mission, but there are many ministries. Okay? Does that speak to... Yeah.
And it takes time. So any resource is just that. It's not a program. There is no program. The only program is becoming missionary disciples in the spirit of St. Alphonsus and the Redemptorists. But it's so any resource you take and you adapt to fit your people. Right? Let it take as long as it takes. So I'm going to ask David to come up and talk about what's at the heart of Redemptorist spirituality.
Everyone agrees that the heart of Redemptorist spirituality is the heart of Christian spirituality, and it's the love of God. That is the primary central thing. God simply loves everyone, everywhere, all the time. And that's been made manifest in Jesus, especially through the gift of redemption. So when it comes right down to it's the center of the gospel, that God is love. That's really, and it's the heart of all Christian spirituality, Redemptorist, Jesuit, Benedictine, Sisters of Mercy. It doesn't matter who it is. It's all essentially about love. And it's the differences are in kind of the background and the history and the sort of approach that one takes to that. But at its heart, it is love of God. One of the lines that shows up in Alphonsus's writing, is it in How to Speak Continuously, Converse, and whatever with God? He says, for God, heaven is the human heart. What's heaven for us is being with God. What's heaven for God is being with us. That our hearts are heaven for God. So it's all about being in loving communion with God and with all that God has made and created and is sustaining. So it's huge and overwhelming, but we each have just a little sliver of that to live out. St. Alphonsus was, he's mystical, there's no question. The hymn we sang last night to begin the prayer service, O God of Loveliness, that's an expression of Alphonsus's own experience of being loved and loving, being loved by God. The line that people like to use a lot when referring to Alphonsus is that God is crazy, beside himself with love for us. Pazzo per amore in Italian. So that's really at the center of it. And the whole missionary effort, I guess, of St. Alphonsus, and as I see it anyway, is to accompany people to discover that they are loved by God, in hopes that that will then and empower them to share that love and help others to know that they too are loved by God. And that's one way of expressing the mission that all of the Redemptorist family shares in common.
Then what we do to try to form Redemptorist associates and to give them some of that spirit that professed Redemptorists have carried so well is, first we'll offer an initial retreat day. And what's essential in that is to talk with them about spirituality. Today we have a lot of different interpretations of spirituality. So to try to draw out of people, what do you think spirituality is? What's Christian spirituality? And then what's Redemptorist spirituality? And the way we've tried to do that in the initial retreat day, but you would have to find a way that fits you. But I find getting people to tell their stories is a really good way. And I'm going to ask you to do that, like to give you a flavor of what we would do on a initial retreat day. It would be just to ask a simple question, and we did a little bit of this last night, but I'm going to ask you to think about a particular Redemptorist or Redemptorist associate. Because I think we're at the stage now where people are being drawn by other Redemptorist associates too. Who drew you into a sense of possibility, that it was possible for you to be a Redemptorist or to be a Redemptorist associate? Who inspired you? Now, it might be more than one person. It might have been a community. Who was that? And what happened there? So who drew you? Who inspired you? And I'm going to ask you to take 2 minutes to think about that and to take that person or that group's face up into your mind, like to draw it out of the file drawer. Give the group a few key words that would give us a sense of how you got attracted, how you got invited into this Redemptorist family, spirituality, charism experience, however you want to phrase that. Give us some key words or phrases.
Enthusiasm.
Enthusiasm. Yeah.
Possibilities.
Possibilities. I say encouragement and mentorship.
I was going to say the sorry. Like someone believed in me.
Someone believed in you.
Reluctance.
Yeah. Yeah. Sure, reluctance.
Long-sought identification.
Long-sought identification.
Seeing generosity and availability.
Seeing generosity and availability.
Home.
Home. Yeah.
Humility.
Humility. Right? So how we invite Redemptorist associates is first of all through example. So the topic for this morning really is about identifying, inviting, and then forming new circles. So what we have to do first is sow seeds, and seeds are sown randomly. So it's through the way we are that Redemptorist associates are first kind of caught. Right? Whether we're professed Redemptorists or lay missionaries of the Most Holy Redeemer or Redemptorist associates, it's through our example and the way we are and the environment that we create, whether it's in a missionary center, a parish, a shrine, whatever the setting is, how we are is what draws Redemptorist associates. Right? They're drawn to people. There's a kind of a saying that goes around that Jesuits are drawn by Ignatius. Redemptorists are drawn by other Redemptorists. And I think there's a lot of truth to that. So Redemptorist associates are drawn by others. We invite people to become professed Redemptorists, and we invite people to become Redemptorist associates. How we phrase or do that invitation will vary from place to place. And I'm going to use this place, Our Lady of the Desert, as an example. Lee and Father Ed and Father Paul, when you began, what was the first thing you did to invite Redemptorist associates?
The very first thing? Just being around. Well,
Yeah.
The first formal thing or just...
Yeah, the first informal thing was just being around.
Yeah, well,
Yeah, loitering with intent.
yes.
And then...
You go to take a bulletin and we preach about it on the weekend.
Okay, so you put an ad in the bulletin and you preached about it on the weekend.
Flyers.
And you had flyers.
Flyers, yes.
Yeah,
And he and I were around the whole weekend to talk to people and after Mass, before Mass.
yeah.
It was very pleasant.
This place is a unique place. That's how they did it in England too. And that's how they're doing it in Ireland too. Because the people who come to the Redemptorist centers, missionary centers, churches in England, Ireland, and here, it's because they choose to come here. This is not a parish per se. They make a conscious choice to come here. So already there's been a weeding out and discernment. They're coming here because they like the way you do things. They're coming here because you're friendly. They're coming here because they found a listening ear, because they find peace. They're coming because they like the quality of the homilies. Whatever it is, the hospitality. They already have weeded something out. So you have a privileged moment because you can say, you folks know us. Come and see if this fits. Right? So you can issue an invitation. In some other places, and Margie, you might talk about St. Teresa's, how did we invite the first Redemptorist associates at St. Teresa's? So we targeted people who fit like the qualities we had up on the screen last night. So we kind of targeted people. How did you do it in Yorkton? And I think every group has to have a little bit of leeway to allow people to discern in their own time and space, right? And not to be too judgmental, but also it's a discernment's a mutual thing. So this thing about fit, it's more than do you fit in with us, or, you like us. It's really, is this your spiritual home? Is this the animating drive for your activity as a missionary disciple in the church. This set of Redemptorist glasses that we put on. Is that true for you? So there has to be, whatever way you choose to invite, it may depend on whether you're a parish or a missionary center, because you have a different audience with a different familiarity. They're there for different reasons, right? So how you invite is going to be shaped by your context. So take that seriously. Lucy is going to have a very different context because Redemptorists have left her parish. And so now the issue is, how many people are saying, oh, well, okay, is that day is gone? And how many are saying, oh, I'm so sad they're gone, and it's kind of a sentimental thing? And how many others are saying, I miss the hospitality. I want some of that good preaching. I want that sense that I belong to something bigger. I want that sense that our God's a loving and abundant God. So you can almost hear that parish is going to weed itself into different groups of people. And one of those groups are going to be Redemptorist associates. The ones who don't just want to hang on for sentimentality reasons, but they do want to hang on for missional reasons. And it might take some while to sort that out, and to give it that time is good.
Yeah, you have to find one another.
Yeah, it's true, right? The others from the mothership, they have to be found. Yeah, it's true. That's the inviting piece. So you're inviting people who have a heart, a Redemptorist heart, a heart for the poor, a heart that overflows with abundant love and abundant grace, a heart that's generous, a heart that's open to lifelong conversion and to calling others to that in the realities of everyday life. So that's the other thing. It's really a lay spirituality. We're living Redemptorist spirituality through our lay life and the realities of that. So it's going to be different than some of the professed live, but not all. There's going to be lots of points of intersection. So inviting people who you already see have some of this, or when they come, inviting them into discernment about that. There's a very different issue when it comes to inviting the next group of Redemptorist associates. Because when you start, you have a very structured way of going at this. You're going to offer them an initial conversation or series of conversations or exploratory times. Then you're going to offer an initial retreat and initial formation sessions, however long that may be, whether it's a few months or a couple of years, whatever you think is the right thing. And then you're going to ask them to discern with the community about enrollment and then ongoing enrollment. But every circle needs to be open to new people. And so how do we invite new people to join an existing circle? And that's where we are for the most part right now. That's our challenge now. How to invite and incorporate new people who haven't had the initial experience and probably won't of the initial retreat and ongoing formation sessions. So 2 suggestions about that. It's a growing area and it's something we do need to explore more together. Couple of things. I think the first thing is mentorship. That a companion for new Redemptorist associates is offered, or they choose their own from among the existing circle, and that people are mentored into being Redemptorist associates. And the other strong suggestion I'd have around that is that every year you do a retreat that goes back to the basics somehow, that focuses on some element, maybe not all, I'm conscious of Lee's comment, that gives people that chance to reflect on some element of Redemptorist spirituality and how we live that as lay people in our lives. So I think that the key elements of incorporating new members into existing circles are going to be mentorship and companionship, and then offering some of those elements like a retreat every year, right? And that our formation sessions are always faith-sharing sessions. They're not just information. And I'm really conscious again of Lee's comment that we're not about feeding minds only. It's important to have your mind fed. More important to have your spirit fed and you be offered opportunities to reflect and grow. So what we're calling formation sessions are just that. They're not teaching sessions. They're not information overload. They're not downloading from the great, motherboard down to you. It's really about forming hearts and forming disciples to a new consciousness of how they are in the heart of the church and the world. And more, we're aware that the Redemptorist constitutions call Redemptorists to proclaim the good news to those who have not heard it, or who haven't heard it as good news for them, or who have been hurt by the church, who've suffered harm because of the church. And I can see your faces now. You're calling particular people to mind. Those are the people who have the heart to reach out to those are the people we're inviting to be Redemptorist associates. And there are more and more people who fit those categories today, who need the presence that the Redemptorist family is able to offer.